Hey folks, before we begin today's episode, I have an update to a prior announcement. Save the date, August 19th. As you may remember, my friend Dr. Robin Sargent, the founder of Idle Courses Academy, is writing a new instructional design book called The Do It Messy Approach, a step-by-step guide for instructional designers and online learning developers. I was fortunate enough to be one of the early readers of Robin's new book, and it's awesome. Robin writes in a clear, concise way that's so simple to follow, and it's really enjoyable to read too. Now you might be asking, who should read the book? And it's obviously tailored for newbies. However, I have to say that experienced instructional designers should also check this out. As a senior instructional designer myself, I loved hearing about other perspectives and seeing what I can pick up to add to my toolkit. So join the waitlist today to read 15 pages of the book right now, and you're going to be getting a 20% discount when the book officially launches on, as you guessed it, August 19th. So sign up for the waitlist today by going to idlecourses.com/book. That's idlecourses.com/book. And now, let's start the show. Hello, Learning Nerd Nation, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you are going to hear today. My name is Dr. Luke Hobson. I'm a senior instructional designer and program manager at MIT. I'm also the author of the book, What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. My passion, my purpose is to help you to learn more about instructional design and to help you along your instructional design journey. Whether you are brand new to the field or you are a veteran, all are welcome in to this podcast. And of course, you can find all my information over at drlukehobson.com. So you might have noticed something a little bit different on today's introduction. That's right, folks. Our community has a new name. At the beginning of every podcast episode, I address you, the listeners, and I intentionally address you in the form of a group. This is because I want you to know that you are not alone in this instructional design journey, and that thousands of other people are listening in with you at the exact same time. I was listening to an audiobook, and the author asked a question about what is your community called? And I've always kind of thought about it, and I was like, oh, instructional design community. However, there are many of you that I have been talking to over the years, and we needed a name for ourselves. I mean, Star Trek fans are Trekkies, Taylor Swift fans are Swifties, Beyonce's fans are the Beehive. Let me be very clear. I am nowhere near as popular as Beyonce, Taylor Swift, or Star Trek, but it would be nice to have a name for ourselves. And when we are coming together as a community or we are talking together, we really should have a name that binds us. I pose to you this question on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and it was crazy to see how many of you commented and offered your own suggestions. And some of my favorites were Luke's Learning League, Learnerds, Knowledge Nerds, Hobbits, Legit Learning League, the Triple L, or Ideals, which stands for Instructional Designers, E-Learning Advocates, and Learning Scientists. And there were many more incredible names, and I just don't have the time to list all of them. But let me just say, folks, all of you are so awesome. You are my kind of nerdy people, and it was so cool to be able to read all of these different things, and to also, I was just shocked, by the way, of how many of you voted. We got like 400 votes at the end of the day, and that poll was only up for 3 days, I think, in total. Shocking. Absolutely crazy to see how many of you voted, and it was so cool to be able to see all of this. So with that being said, I tabulated the results, and Learning Nerd Nation just barely squeaked by, just barely won. I was kind of shocked. I thought the majority of you were going to say Learning Nerds, but I came up with Learning Nerd Nation like literally right on the spot. But it resonated with you folks. And what I love about the name, the more that I had time to kind of think about it, and I was seeing the polls start to go and sway from one to the other. But what I actually really like about the name is that it kind of combines both of the names. You have to be a learning nerd to be a part of Learning Nerd Nation. It just makes sense. So in essence, we're combining the two, and hey, we now have a new identity, which is really cool. I'm going to be doing more with this idea. I'm going to do more community building and events and networking and all those other things like that. But for now, feel free to join the new LinkedIn group that I created, literally called Learning Nerd Nation. You can go and search for it. It should pop up right away. Or, of course, you can go into the show notes and find the link over there. Now, with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, on today's episode, we are going to be diving on in and talking about the pros and cons of online learning. This topic actually came up as a request from my MIT colleagues to do a collaboration project together on one of their blog posts, and that is going to be coming out later on. But I also thought it'd be really interesting to take this blog post, expand upon it, and then to flip it into a podcast episode. And the reason being is because of how popular online learning has become, and it should be popular. It's been around for decades. The terminology of online learning, though, it can be interpreted quite differently depending upon the person and their experiences. It's not that surprising at all to hear from some people say that, you know what, it's just not for them, while other people say that that is their preference. They only will take online learning courses. And I can completely understand both perspectives, as I have been an online student, I've been an online instructor, I've been a face-to-face instructor, and of course I've been an instructional designer. On one hand, I have witnessed incredible methods of online learning that left students stunned and wowed at how great the experience was. On the other hand, I have personally enrolled into some courses as a student, and right away, there were red flags where I was like, nope, I'm withdrawing immediately. This is not going to go well. However, if you were to ask me and say, Luke, can you just give me kind of like the general details, paint some very broad brushstrokes, and tell me more about the pros and cons of online learning? Well, this is what I would say to you. So first, let's start with the pros. Number one is flexibility. Online learning's greatest strength and advantage is flexibility. It's why hundreds of thousands of students have chosen to go back to school for online certificates and online degrees. Asynchronous courses allow students to complete their work at their own pace. However, it's not just about trying to find the time to submit the assignments and consume the content. It's also about finding the optimal time to do so. This doesn't get enough attention, by the way, because when I'm saying optimal timing, I'm saying about when are people going to be their very best? When are they the most attentive? When are they the most focused? When are they the most creative? For some, it's getting their work done early in the morning. I'm like that. I do everything early in the morning. My most productive time frame is honestly between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. And I know that that's kind of wild, but that is true. If you ask me to do things in the evening, I am not as sharp, and that is what it is. For some people, it's the exact opposite. They can't do a thing into the morning until they've already had at least a couple of cups of coffee, gone on with their day, and then in the evening or in the afternoon, they start to perk up, and that is when they are at their best. So having a flexible schedule to say when you want to do the coursework, when you want to participate, is such a powerful tool. Now also, let's not forget about the fact too that for some people, it's not more about the optimal time frame, but it's more about thinking about their entire schedule and where this simply fits in. There's a lot of folks out there who are incredibly busy. They already have a full-time job, a part-time job, they have kids, they have other commitments, they have all these other different things going on. So for them, they need to be able to do their classwork, say in the evenings or over the weekends, or just a couple hours here and there, wherever it does make sense. So for that reason, it definitely makes sense to have the online learning option. Whatever works best for the students should be the priority of a learning experience, and that is why online learning is so powerful. The second pro is community. Whenever I ask students about the main reason for enrolling in an online course, the top reason is networking and community. They crave finding like-minded individuals who are going through the same struggles and have the same questions. They want to find a place where they belong, and being in the company of others who understand what they are going through is the perfect place for actively listening and sharing wisdom. This type of community fosters supports and motivation for when times are hard and when times are worth celebrating. I've witnessed past students create study groups, host book clubs, and they have carried on way beyond the end of the course. And it's amazing to hear about how it just all started from a single discussion board post, and then now they are lifelong friends, conquering and doing amazing things together. In my own personal courses, I have found that if I can create the community environment right from the beginning, then students are far more likely to succeed inside of the course. For instance, I host kickoff calls when all of my courses begin. I bring in everyone together and we do an event called Speed Networking. For those of you who have taken courses on EduFlow Academy, this is a standard. This is what we do. We pair people up and then put them into breakout rooms on Zoom for 5 minutes at a time. After those 5 minutes are up, we come back into the main breakout room, and then we rotate the different people around to form new pairs and then send them on back into breakout rooms, and we keep this going. And eventually, this will be happening for about 30 minutes or an hour, depending upon the event. And what this does is that this instantly creates bonds and friendships, and these carry over into the discussion boards and the future workshops. I see it all the time of like, oh, hey, John, it was so great just to see you the other day inside of that event. So nice to meet you. Can't wait to look forward with working with you, and so on and so forth. It always happens every single time. So if you can create that community from the start, if we can have that kickoff, if we can create those bonds right away, people are likely to want to be able to enjoy working with others, and they're going to participate more, and they're going to stay to the end of the course. That's exactly how it works. And the third pro is the latest information. A main benefit of online learning that isn't talked about enough is speed. When I say speed, I don't mean being quick with learning. I actually mean speed to market. There are so many new ideas that are constantly evolving within technical spaces that it's impossible to keep courses the way that they were originally designed for a long period of time. A program on AR and VR or nanotechnology, additive manufacturing, machine learning, those have to be checked and updated almost on a monthly basis because technology is constantly changing. For more formal types of learning, they have difficulty with changing content at this same type of pace, but within the online world. More formal types of learning have difficulty with changing content at this pace, like within face-to-face or more traditional classrooms. But within the online world, it's expected. It is expected to make these adjustments based upon how the world is changing. If somebody has a course that is 5 years old, it's not going to go well. It has to be updated. But I know that when I took courses in person, it was so common to see somebody go back and make references to something from 10 years ago. And I'm like, Nothing has updated 10 years. It's still the same. So that is a very different level of an expectation. And if the content, hypothetically speaking, let's say it can't be changed fast enough, the team is way too busy, there's way too much going on, they're backed up, the instructional designers, the online instructors, they can't physically change quick enough to keep up with the times. Well, what do? Well, the instructor can adapt with announcements, discussions, emails, and more. So let me explain. Even if the content hasn't necessarily changed, it still makes sense to bring the real world into the classroom if it pertains to the subject matter. For instance, when I was teaching a graduate course on marketing, we covered the power of influencers. Huge brands have brought in big name influencers to support their causes, and for some of them, they have become like the identity of the brand. But what about the opposite effect when that happens? What if a big name influencer denounces a product? In the course content that I had been working with, that wasn't covered. It was more about the power of the positive side of influencers, not with the negative side. But as I was teaching this module, this exact case happened in the real world. World famous superstar soccer player Ronaldo, I know literally all of you know who Ronaldo is, he sat down for a press conference in 2020 and was visibly irritated that 2 Coca-Cola bottles were placed in front of him. He looked at them, and then he moved them out of the way and exclaimed agua as he was raising a water bottle, implying drink water instead of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola lost $4 billion off their market value that day. Now, let me just say that again, just to make sure that really does hit home for you. In 5 seconds, one person, who is arguably one of the world's most powerful influencers today, said drink water instead of Coke, and that cost them $4 billion. I had to include this in the course because it was perfectly timed with the section on influencers and marketing. So the latest information can be added to make a difference inside of online courses. And this is just one example, but there are many, many ways to add more of the real world and bring it into the academic online space. Now that I've discussed a few of the pros, let's also be realistic and discuss the cons. Online learning isn't perfect, and I myself have experienced some things that really turn me off from the online space. Con number 1 is the learning environment. I mentioned before about the power of flexibility of asynchronous courses, but for some, it has an adverse reaction. Some students thrive with live lessons and having an instructor they can connect with multiple times a week. They need these live interactions to feel supported and to carry on. Having an instructor to set deadlines and set the pace and the tone of a course will guide them in the right direction. And if they don't have this direction, it is extremely overwhelming and they don't feel supported. In a way, it can feel like you're actually by yourself and it's a lonely process, even though there's probably anywhere from 10 to 30 other students online at the same time as you. Most of the successful students who I have talked to within the online space mention that they are self-directed learners, meaning they can learn on their own with the right learning environment, guidance, materials, and assignments. They know themselves well enough to know that they don't need live interactions to hold themselves accountable or to help them grow. They can do things on their own time and they can teach themselves. They aren't hesitant to reach out for help when they need it, and they don't want to wait until they actually need to do this. For these kinds of students, an online learning environment is perfect. It really comes down to, though, the preferences as different types of schools and organizations host their online environments in different ways. Some of my courses have live events, while others don't. Some are built around a cohort and a community, while others are more individualized. It all comes down to preferences and finding what works for you. But if you take something that's in the online space and expect it to be one learning environment, and instead it turns out to be a different learning environment, well then instantly, that's a con. The next con is repetition. Throughout grad school, I enrolled in several online courses and programs. After a while, I realized that the structure was so repetitive that I already knew what the course was going to look like before I even signed up. Most of the classes had a structure that asked me to do something like this: a reading, respond to 2 discussion posts, and then submit an essay every single week. This was fine at first, but after a while, I didn't feel engaged with the learning experience. I basically set my mind to cruise control and would just mindlessly submit posts and essays, and I would always do well. There was no challenge. There was no critical thinking. I felt like I literally couldn't fail as long as I did the basics. There were actually times where, in order to make myself have some sense of excitement and some sense of pressure, what I would use, it would be like a weird timing inside of my head where I would start a paper at 11 p.m. at night, and then I would try to submit it before the midnight deadline. Basically challenging myself to say, hey, Luke, if you're so smart, can you write this paper in an hour and actually do well? And the thing is because, once again, it wasn't more about if I was actually smart enough to do the paper. It was that I knew exactly how to format it and in a certain type of way because I knew what the professors were looking for. Unfortunately, many online courses out there still offer this exact same type of structure, and students need more excitement. On the bright side of things, there are many different types of online courses that do offer multiple kinds of learning activities and assessments and using a variety of forms of learning techniques and content and everything else of a sort that makes the learning experience come alive, and it makes it awesome. But those are certainly way harder to find because of the fact it's more difficult to be able to do and to pull it off and to do it well. And the final con, folks, is underestimation. From speaking with many students, quite a few of them underestimate how much work is required in an online course. There still seems to be some misconceptions in thinking that online learning is somehow easier compared to face-to-face learning. I'm not entirely sure of the root cause of this problem, but I have seen TV shows and other forms of entertainment in our culture applying this. I can actually still recall one example of Family Guy where Stewie, the baby inside of the talking baby inside of a show, he wanted to become a lawyer, but he didn't have the right credentials. So he hops onto his laptop, enters in his credit card information on the University of Phoenix's website, and then instantly says, "Oop, there we go, I'm now a lawyer." And then he goes to court and instantly loses his very first case, saying, "Oh, sorry." Now, obviously, this is an extreme example, but this was a trend years ago, is that you would just sign up for a course and then instantly print out a piece of paper that said it was going to be your certificate or your degree. Now, fast forward to 2022, and the perceptions of the majority of people have greatly changed when it comes to recognizing online courses' integrity and just how challenging that they could be. For those students who do underestimate how long they will need to spend in the online classroom or how challenging the assignments can be, it's a difficult process to change that mindset. The ones who succeed are the ones who create a plan. They manage their time, they form a support system and a network, and they work towards being able to establish new routines and new habits. It is a massive commitment to go back to school for a long period of time, and especially within the online space, because it is much more dependent on you. And as such, you should be treating these types of courses with this in mind, about how it is going to be challenging. But of course, at the end of the day, it can absolutely be rewarding. To make a very long story short, there are pros and cons to online learning, just like how there are pros and cons with literally everything else that there is. With the right support system, the right guidance, the right learning environment, the right facilitators, incredible feats can be achieved inside of the online learning space. But that is the end of the pros and cons list, folks. Do me a favor, share this episode and tag me on LinkedIn and tell me, in your opinion, what's the biggest pro and con about online learning? Really curious to hear your thoughts on this one. I wrote down a couple of ones that obviously came to mind. I had 6 in total, but if I wanted to keep on going, I think I could just write an entire book literally on the pros and cons of online learning if I really wanted to. So share your thoughts with me. Tag me. Let me know what you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, give it a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you are listening. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. You can just simply go on YouTube and search Dr. Luke Hobson. It will pop right up. And be sure to check out my book on Amazon if you haven't already, called What I Wish I Knew Before Becoming an Instructional Designer. Once again, join the new LinkedIn group, Learning Nerd Nation. You can just go ahead and search for that. That is going to pop right up. Or, of course, you can once again go down below into the show notes and click on it over there. And as always, you can find all my content and all my information over at drlukehobson.com. But hey, folks, that is all I have for you. Stay nerdy out there. Now I'll talk to you next time.